Alright, guys, how's it going? So, long time ago in another life, I actually wrote a book, and I kind of have given up on writing this book here a while ago, but I think most of that was due to support and not actually my desire to finish it, because anyone who's ever written anything will know that you gotta finish what you start sometimes because it just keeps haunting you. So when you're trying to get back into writing something, the best way to reinvigorate your mind and reconnect yourself to the story and the characters is to actually read what you've written. And usually you read it out loud because you catch a lot of mistakes and flow issues. And I figured since I'm going to be reading it out loud to myself, I might as well share it with you guys because you might be interested in this story. Even though this is a sequel, it's very standalone and you won't have any trouble following. I kind of like the idea that you'd start this story here without the stuff in the beginning. In a lot of ways, it's like Star Wars, because he started Episode 4 with the movies. There was a lot of mystery around that. So, same thing with this. I mean, you're not going to be more lost than you should be, and there's always that mystery. And there'll be some things that you just don't quite get, but that's how a lot of novels are, anyways. So, I'm just gonna read. You can take it or leave it. I know I'm not. I kind of read like a 5-year-old. Hopefully I write better than I read, right? So I'll do my best here, and it's screen capture, so I don't know how well you'll be able to track, but I'll try to slow down so you could see the words as well. If you just want to mute my voice and read alone, that is allowed. I have a little water here with me. Okay. Here we go. Chapter 1. And time came and passed, and the world was formed anew. Part 1. Keepers of Sha'ar. Chapter 1. Jerusalem, 598 BC. Come, Azana, a white-haired priest prodded a dark-skinned servant boy with his staff. We have little time. Clutching heavy scrolls tight to his chest, the boy continued up the steps of the Temple Mount. In the distance, Jerusalem's walls were afray of commotion. The conquering forces of the Babylonians had taken the eastern gate into David's city and were sweeping through the cities like a plague. It would only be moments until they were at the temple gates. The old priest hobbled into the courtyard, leaning heavily upon his staff. "Where's the temple guard?" His coarse voice heaved in dismay. Azana hurried through the gatehouse behind his master. Its open doors left unguarded. Not a soul was in sight. "Cowards," the priest muttered, and began the ascent of the temple's wide stair. King Josiah did not restore the pinnacle of our faith to have it desecrated once more by these pagans. Dark clouds rolled in and blanketed the sun, casting an eerie gloom across the city. Azana shuddered at a chill running up his spine, but followed faithfully after the priest. The cripple sat with his lame legs folded at the entrance to the temple. Azana paused to marvel at the gold-plated stones lining the archway, while the priest advanced upon the man and glowered at him harshly. "What are you doing here?" he demanded. "Where is the temple guard and the priests?" Hands covering his head, the cripple bowed. "Forgive me," the man whimpered. "I crawled here only wishing to collect a small trinket from the temple to sell for food, but I could not get past these doors." He lifted swollen eyes to the master and servant. "Everyone fled to hide the sacred ornaments before the Babylonians came to steal them away, as did Shishak's plundering army when the Egyptians swept across the land. It would be better for me to take a few treasures away than leave them to be melted down." The priest knelt and gripped the cripple by his tattered cloak. "I do not care about a few bronze bowls, you blabbering fool." His grayed eyebrows bristled with impatience. "What of the Holy Ark? Tell me." "They have taken it to safety." Lips quivering, the man stared blankly into the priest's eyes. "No, master. They were too afraid they would be struck down by Yahweh's wrath." A hollow breath escaped the priest's old lungs. Old priest lungs. I kind of like that. Old lungs, we'll remove that. Without a word, he stumbled to his feet and leaned. Without a word, he stumbled to his feet and leaned into the temple's heavy studded doors. Izana gave the aid of his weight, and together they pushed the door aside. It was dim inside. Only a few torches remained aglow in the sconces along the inner walls. The priest took one in hand and led the way deeper into the temple. Izana's stare grew wide as they passed between countless rows of bronze pillars and made their way into the inner court. Even in the darkness, the temple was a beautiful and wonderful sight. There's probably going to be a lot of that, sorry. I can't spell. Wondrous sight. Izana had never been into the temple. The master he was sold to in Cairo no longer served in Jerusalem. They had only just returned before the invaders arrived to lay siege to the city. The priest took a winding path through the corridors supported by the towering columns and came to a symbol carved into the gold at their feet. The carving spanned a wide area of the floor, and Izana held the torch while the priest used the tip of his staff to trace the golden grooves. There was a sudden click and the staff penetrated the plated floor. Arm locked over the handle of the oaken shaft, the priest pressed down, and levered the sheet of carved gold and its cedar base from the glossy surface. With Izana's help, he slid the heavy section of floor to the side, and a plume of dust rose from an uncovered hole. The priest took back the torch and held it over the secret vault. Careful to be gentle on his old knees, he rested an arm on the floor and lowered himself into the vault. He was old a lot. Fix that later. To think of another word. "Hand me the scrolls, boy." Once he had carefully set the rolls of parchment into stone slots on the vault's side, the priest took Izana's hands and climbed out. Without a word, the aged master reclaimed his staff and headed off deeper into the temple. "Shall we place the cover back?" Izana humbly followed after his master. The priest's staff clacked along the stone. He glanced back at the boy. "Not yet." Izana did not speak again. They traveled to a door with golden hinges and a glossy frame of cedar wood. On the other side was a chamber lined with pure gold. 2 torches flickered in brackets attached to the pedestals of a pair of angels with wings spanning the width of the room. Sweat forming upon his brow, the priest limped on until pausing to rest against a pillar. Past the pair of columns was an arched doorway with a great curtain masking the entrance. White, ghostly light hovered like a fog around the edges of the curtain. Fingers trembling, the old master waved the boy to his side. "Listen, and listen well, my son." The priest put a hand on the boy's shoulder. "Stay here, and do not follow me. If I do not return from behind that curtain, I want you to leave the temple and get as far away as possible." The old master bent to Izana's eye level. "Do not come after me. Do you understand?" Izana nodded in solemn silence. The priest patted the boy on the head with a quivering hand and straightened his robe. Staff cast aside, he took slow steps toward the archway. Izana's heart beat strong and fast for his master, feeling his fear as his own. The priest stopped once the curtain was in reach and knelt to offer a whispered blessing. In trepidation, Izana clutched the pillar and waited. The priest extended a hand to brush the hollowed cloth aside, when a clamor echoed from the corridor leading to the holy sanctum. Shouts reached their ears, and torchlight spread along the walls toward them. The priest spun, frozen in place. Eyes falling upon Izana, he pointed into the shadows outside the archway. "Hide, and do not show yourself," he said, "no matter what becomes of me." Izana scurried away into a corner and crouched behind a bronze wash basin to watch from the darkness. The priest held his ground while the clatter of armed men advanced upon him. Clad in scaled armor, a Babylonian commander appeared from the shadows with a contingent of 20 soldiers at his heels. Sword drawn and gleaming in the torchlight, the man came within a stroke's distance of the priest. A blade raised to his throat, the priest held his breath. Out of breath, the Babylonian spoke in uncouth Hebrew. I used breath twice, I'll fix that later. The old master glanced at the archway, and the commander caught the quick eye movement. Weapon withdrawn, the soldier took a step toward the fog-shrouded curtain. The priest gripped the commander's shoulder. Shoulder guard in an attempt to stop him. "May Yahweh strike you down," he cried. The invader spun on the priest, and Izana watched in horror as a blade was driven into his master's abdomen. The boy muffled a cry with his hands, and the priest limply toppled to the floor. Ears keen to the slight cry, the leader pointed his stained sword at the darkness where Izana hid. Spears raised, 2 men rushed forward and pulled the boy from behind the stand by the scruff of his neck. Thrown to his knees before the Babylonian captain, the boy looked up at the unmerciful eyes of the man who had slain his master. Cold stare shifting to a soldier with a ready spear, the commander gave a stiff nod, signaling the man to execute. The bronze tip touched the base of the boy's neck to mark its target, and retracted to gain momentum for the thrust. Without remorse for his deeds, the Babylonian captain turned to desecrate the Holy of Holies. Before the blow landed, a wind, swift and strong, ushered from an unseen source. The torches sputtered out, and gray wisps of smoke filled the chamber. The men became frantic and fearful, and swords rattled from their sheaths. Izana spied a pair of dark, shrouded irises with a gleaming purple tint approaching from behind. Steel cut the air, obliterating the bronze weaponry of the Babylonian forces. Confusion fell amongst the invaders, and they struck at shadows and began to war amongst themselves. The boy curled into a ball and covered his ears to deafen the sounds of the gruesome slaughter. At last, when all but he had fallen to the fiery blades wielded by the wraith, the captain charged into the darkness with a war cry. There was a single whisper of a blade, and the man's wicked head rolled past Izana, and then beneath the curtain. The boy shivered in fear as a monstrous shadow swept past him and pulled the curtain aside. Brilliant light flooded into the chamber, revealing the strewn bodies of the Babylonians. Violet and snow-white, the glow was so bright, Izana had to shade his eyes from it. The wraith stood before the golden ark. The being's height was double that of the tallest man he'd ever seen. 3 men in black armor and hoods entered with torches through the cedar door and stood before Izana's cowering form. "Regol, more are coming," the foremost of the 3 said. The towering specter, the last of the Nephilim, turned and removed a silver helm from its face. Beautiful black hair fell along the face of a woman with flawless white skin, her breathtaking eyes piercing the shadows. Izana could not believe the sight, and stared in gaping awe. "Bar the door," she instructed, and sheathed her long, sickle-shaped blades. Reverent, she entered the Holy of Holies and bowed before the altar. Between the 2 cherubim, upon the cover of the ark, rested a triangular stone, from which the radiance emanated. Hands gripping the edge of the golden slab upon which the sacred ark rested, Megal lifted and slid back the enormous weight. Uncovered a passage led deep into the foundation of the temple. When she had turned from the task, Izana was in the hands of one of the cloaked men. What of the boy? The Gaul strode forward and loomed over him. He has seen, and yet he lives. Her voice was smooth and full of wisdom. For his heart must be pure, so we shall in turn spare him as well. Armed with a silver sword that enchanted Izana's gaze, the eldest of the warriors bowed. If left, they leave him certain death. I will take him under my care, for I am old, and my time grows short. Gaul nodded, and not a moment later the cedar door shuddered against the force, ramming it from the outside. They are breaking through. The Gaul unsheathed their blade. Carry the ark by the poles, but do not touch it. Izana, tasked with lighting the way, waited in the passage with a torch while the Nephilim departed to secure the cedar door. The largest of the three warriors gripped two of the poles and locked their golden shafts under his thick forearms. Taking the other end, the smaller men balanced the weight over their shoulders and entered the steep corridor. The men grunted amidst their labor, and Izana held the torch high before them as they descended. A musty stench from the sealed passageway permeated the air, and layers of dust swept off the unused steps to circle around them like ghosts. Each movement was painfully careful, lest one man stumble and fall into the unknown dark of the tunnel. Izana did not know. This is why we do this. Izana did not know how far they had to go, but he could feel the urgency rising amongst the bearers of the ark. In the temple room above, the sound of splintering wood and bending hinges echoed into the corridors. Shouts and the rush of metal poured into the chamber and were immediately met by the terror of the Nephilim. Screams followed, and the men below held their breath, hoping the Babylonian force would be repelled by the Gaul's swift blade. Just got 2 blades. Amidst the commotion, however, voices signaled that the secret passage had been discovered. Orange light cast upon the dark walls behind the ark, and became as fiery claws wishing to secure it within its grasp. Their pace tripled. Izana led the men down the final length of stair into a narrow hall. Now at a near run to keep ahead of the swift men, the boy stumbled. The floor's surface had dropped away, and Izana tumbled to his knees in waist-high water. Torch nearly extinguished by the splash, the boy gazed out upon an endless expanse of black water. At the edge of the drop-off, the men halted. And the leader sat down his end to jump into the underground lake. I think he just said, I hate grammar. What will we do? Izana shivered from the cold wet that now saturated his tunic. The tunnel is flooded. The man gave no heed to the servant's words and waited until the surface of the water reached his chest. Majestic, even in the faint light, the silver gleam of the leader's cryptic blade penetrated the dark. Raised above his head, as if prepared to deliver a killing blow, the warrior plunged the weapon into the water. Gray ripples spread from the site of the strike, and a mystical glow hovered beneath the water's surface. Blade in hand, the man returned to the edge of the lake and helped the others lower the ark. The rustle of armor could be heard entering the hall, and the soldiers rushed at them from the darkness. The first 2 were met by the edge of the silver blade and tumbled to either side of the passage. Go, the leader shouted before his next attacker engaged. His 2 men carrying the ark hesitated, but soon realized that the safety of the ancient relic was far more important than any of their lives. Izana turned to watch the warrior battle, an overwhelming number, but even surrounded, the brilliant sword did not waver. The weapon severed spear shafts in single strokes and cut through the scaled armor of its foes with its master's experienced guidance. Torches from the fallen lay scattered upon the ground, encircling the fray with a haunting glow that transformed the fighters into contorted shadows. Pulled from the horrid scene, Izana's eyes turned to check upon the progress of the arc-bearers. He held the torch high, but only ripples remained where the men had been. A splash disrupted the boy's wide-eyed astonishment as a man fell into the lake beside him. Pulled beneath the dark water by the weight of his armor, the Babylonian writhed about. Terror striking each line of his face, Izana grabbed the man by the head before he could find his feet. Arms locked at the elbows, the boy used his weight to hold the man under. Almost unconscious of his actions, he stared at the soldier's pleading eyes below the surface. The man clutched at the boy's arms, but still Izana held. Each second felt as hours until the man's fingers went limp and his body slunk below. Izana peered at the hands before him as if he did not recognize them as his own. The dim cavern seemed a silent tomb to the boy's deafened ears, but a faint cry shook him from the dreamlike trance. He looked in time to see the wielder of the silver blade fall and clench a wound. Back turned to the assailant, the swordsman appeared, defeated. Eyes spying Izana, the man gave the boy a sly wink and thrust his sword past his side. Approaching to finish the task, the Babylonian was met with a sharpened edge. Stunned and confused, the man glanced at the sword in his gut and then collapsed to his knees. Pivoting around, the warrior shoved the corpse to the side and withdrew the tainted blade. Two soldiers remained, and together they rushed forth with extended spears. The warrior's sword deflected the first shaft to the side, then caught the second man below the chin. The weapon raised to dispatch the final foe. The swordsman felt a sharp pain tear into his side. The Babylonian withdrew his spear from the man's flesh to prepare for another strike, but the shaft split in his hands, severed by the flash of a silver arc. The blood-drenched spear had spun to the stone floor and left the soldier unarmed. Another powerful slash cut the air, and the final Babylonian toppled beside his fallen brethren. Izana realized he had been holding his breath once the eerie quiet returned to the underground chasm. The hapless bodies of the slain littered the ground, and smoke gathered in a gray smog around the only combatant still standing. The warrior made eye contact with the boy and grinned, but even young eyes could detect the masked pain. Sword still locked in an iron grip, he took a step, but faltered and came near to collapsing. With Izana's help, the wounded fighter lowered himself into the lake. Together they waded until the boy could no longer keep his chin above the surface. The warrior struck the water with a silver blade, and a shockwave rippled past them. Circular, a reflective pane appeared and shimmered before the boy's eyes. He stared into the liquid mirror, but did not see his face. Deep below the portal lingered a strange darkness with a single faint light at the center, burning as if a torch lay beneath the water. The warrior took the back of Izana's head in the palm of his hand. "Hold your breath, boy." Izana nodded and inhaled the cavern's mildew-wrought air into his lungs. Eyes closed, he felt the cold, mystical fluid brush the curled hair from his face. The lake floor disappeared beneath his feet, and the deeper they drifted, the warmer the water became. Lost in an endless expanse of space, not knowing up from down, Izana swam toward the distant light. Lungs straining for air, he began to flounder and search for the surface. When strong hands grasped him by the shoulders. Pulled free from the water, Izana kneeled on a tiled step and coughed the fluid from his lungs. Bathed in torchlight, the room around him was supported by stone arches, and mosaics lined the walls. A pool in the shape of a half-moon shimmered behind him and washed along the small stair where he rested. The underground lake from where he had come was not in sight. The two men who had vanished before him helped their injured companion from the stair and laid him beside the pool. Zana crawled to the warrior's side and watched the men attend the wounds. Sword handle clasped against his blackened chestplate, he stared at the ceiling that shimmered with the pool's crystalline reflection. His breaths were at first heavy, but began to grow faint, and his body began to calm. He needs the fruit, one of the aides instructed. Hurry. The man departed, and the warrior's head rolled to face Azana. He smiled with a warm radiance, and the boy could see for the first time that he was of great age. Elbow pivoting, the man placed the sword in Azana's hands. I have carried this blade for more than 400 years, and many have kept it before me. The warrior's voice was strong with resolve, though the life was nearly drained from him. It is called Sha'ar, the gateway. Zana observed the decorated symbols of the blade and the curved spirals of silver that formed the handle. A star was etched into the flat of the metal near the hilt, and 3 sections of a divided circle were positioned around it. The warrior took hold of Zana's wrist. We await the day, the return. A hand rested on the wounded man's chest to restrain him. Rest, his companion urged. The other returned with a satin cloth wrapped around an object carefully cradled in both hands. Kneeled beside his paled leader, the man petitioned the elder to take the remedy. He accepted the fruit with hesitancy, its dark blue skin causing it to glimmer like a gem in the faint light. Eyes closed in meditation, he pondered the gift of life and knew that his time had come. The companions looked on in silence as their friend returned the healing fruit. They acknowledged his decision with nods of respect, and both took a knee to bow in honor. The passage awaits me. His eyes shut, and he became limp as one dead. Look to the heavens for the day. His dried lips whispered, await the return of the light of Eden. Moonlight shifted with swaying waters that washed along the deserted shore bank. A sleeping fishing village rested nearby. A short distance from the village, a cave sat perched upon the highest point of the rocky cove. It looked out into the sea and watched the endless blanket of stars as if waiting for a sign. Sapphire and silver, the glorious lights above filled the entrance of the cave with their numinous glow. Inside, a figure rested against the wall of his shallow prison. Hunched with legs folded to his chest, the man did his best to stay hidden in the shadows. His eyes, the color of faded silver, stared out into the night. They did not move nor blink, but only watched as they had for eternity's length. Wrapped in tight cloths like a leper, the man appeared as one dead. Chains binding each of his arms were fastened deep into the stone, and a collar of thick iron secured his neck to the wall. Amongst the tide that beat against the shoreline, tortured whispers flowed from the condemned soul's lips. How much longer must we wait? The stars are empty. They speak no more, replied a voice entirely different from the one before, but uttered from the same mouth. We are lost. Forgotten. The man laughed, his tone transformed to a sickly pitch. Never forgotten. He would never forget our failure. Sheol would not even have us now. Our fate has been sealed. Stricken with sudden madness, the man warred within himself and fought against his restraints. His legs flailed wildly, and body convulsed in a violent seizure. He screamed, his voice changing with each curse that spewed from his black throat. Why? The man tried to claw at himself, but the chains would not allow it. It is because of you we are now imprisoned. We have suffered here, through age beyond age, all because you fled that night, when the bearer's life was within your grasp. The voices echoing about the cave. They soon chose to be suffocated by the silence once again. After staring out into the night for a long while, the man's gaze fell to the cold ground, and a lone whisper issued from his lips. Time will bring us redemption. The Nine shall rise and become again the crimson blade the darkness once relied upon to scathe the light from this wretched realm. We have but to return to our master with his utmost desire in hand, and together, this time, we shall not know defeat. Spittle seethed through the man's clenched jaws. He will not heed your false hopes any longer, Crawl. The Athornium is no more. It was destroyed in the flood. A radiant beam shone upon the man's face, its sudden brightness causing him to wince in anguish. Eyes lifted in rage, he beheld a heavenly light that marred the night with such potency it drowned out all the other stars. Head twisting to escape the torturous glow, the man snarled and rattled his chains. His struggle ceased. The man froze in concentration. The spirits inside felt a presence enter the realm from an unknown portal. It was an energy that they had not felt in a long time, but their minds could never forget. Hatred brewed deep within, and the possessed soul's eyes flared molten silver. In one quick motion, the man tore his chains from the walls in a burst of fragmented stone and rushed to the edge of the cliff. Enveloped in the golden hue of the omen above, the vessel's back arched, and his whole form contorted. His fingers formed claws, and his teeth became as fangs. He screamed out at the sea. "The Watcher!" All demons roared together, their unified voice carrying along the water into the night and leaving behind an echo of revenge. No chapter 2 for you. Alright guys, get the likes up on this one, keep me going. If I get enough likes, I'll write more. That's the deal. I got a few chapters, but I'm not telling you how many I've written, okay? So get me up to 1,000 likes and maybe we'll see another video, alright? Thanks for listening.